You won't believe this. A woman from my HOA tried to ban my garden lights. Yeah, you heard that right, lights. The ones I paid for, installed myself, on my own property. She said they were too bright and against the community aesthetic. But here's the twist. What started as a petty complaint turned into the most embarrassing downfall this HOA Karen had ever faced. And I didn't even have to raise my voice to make it happen. Let me tell you how one woman's obsession with control ended up shining a very bright light on her own hypocrisy. My name's Ethan Rogers. I live in a quiet suburban neighborhood in Colorado, one of those communities with neat lawns, friendly neighbors, and an HOA that loves to remind you who's really in charge. Now, I've always been the kind of guy who enjoys his backyard. After years of hard work, I finally decided to make it something special. Flower beds, a small fountain, a deck, and yes, some solar-powered garden lights to give it that cozy evening glow. They weren't flashy, just little warm lights along the walkway and around the roses. My family loved it. My wife called it our mini paradise. But apparently, not everyone thought so. One morning, I was out watering my plants when I saw a note taped to my door. It read, "Your garden lights are not compliant with HOA regulations. Please remove them immediately to maintain neighborhood uniformity." HOA board, I was confused. There was no signature, no specific rule quoted, just that vague uniformity nonsense. So, I checked the HOA handbook. Guess what? There was nothing about garden lights. The only rule said, no excessive or intrusive exterior lighting. Mine were solar lights with low brightness, barely bright enough to see the path. I figured maybe it was a mistake, so I let it go. Until the next day. That's when I met Linda. If you've ever lived in an HOA neighborhood, you probably know a Linda. She's the self-appointed enforcer who walks around with a clipboard, acting like the neighborhood sheriff. I was out trimming my bushes when she strutted up, sunglasses on, clipboard in hand, and said, "Hi, I'm Linda from the HOA. We need to talk about those lights of yours." I smiled politely. "Sure thing. What seems to be the problem?" "They're a violation," she said flatly. "Really?" "I read the handbook. There's nothing against garden lights." She crossed her arms. "Well, they don't fit the look of our community. They're distracting. People have complained." I looked around. The only person close enough to even see my lights was her. "Who complained?" I asked. She smirked. "That's confidential." That's when I realized there were no complaints. Linda just wanted to control something. A week later, I got an official warning letter in the mail from the HOA board, signed by Linda herself. Failure to remove non-compliant lighting will result in fines and potential legal action. I couldn't believe it. Over garden lights? So, I emailed the HOA asking for a meeting to discuss the supposed violation. When the day came, I walked into the HOA office, small, stuffy, and filled with framed photos of smiling board members. Linda was sitting there with two others. I calmly showed pictures of my lights, copies of the handbook, and even brought my electricity bill to prove they were solar. One board member, Mr. Taylor, nodded. "Honestly, I don't see a violation here." But Linda cut him off. "It's about consistency. If we allow him to have these, next thing you know, people will be putting up neon signs and flashing colors." I almost laughed. "These are soft white solar lights, Linda. They're barely brighter than a candle." But she wasn't listening. She was determined to win. The next week, I got a $200 fine in the mail. That's when I decided enough was enough. I filed an appeal, citing that there was no rule violation. At the same time, I started doing a little research on Linda. See, every HOA board's records are public. And when I looked at the meeting minutes and reports, I noticed something strange. Linda had approved her own home improvements without any HOA vote. She'd installed a new patio cover, repainted her shutters a color not on the approved list, and even put up string lights in her backyard. Exactly the kind of thing she was fining others for. Bingo. I didn't confront her right away. I wanted to do it right. So I gathered evidence, photos of her property, the HOA meeting notes showing she never filed official approval forms, and statements from 2 neighbors who'd received fines for doing less. Then, I waited for the next HOA meeting. That evening, the room was full. Several residents had shown up because, apparently, I wasn't the only one who'd been targeted by Linda. She opened the meeting like she was the president of the country, saying, "First order of business, non-compliant exterior lighting on Mr. Rogers's property." That's when I stood up and said, "Actually, before we talk about my lights, maybe we should talk about yours." The room went silent. I handed out printed photos, side-by-side comparisons. My tiny solar garden lights versus her bright hanging string lights wrapped around her porch and fence. According to HOA guidelines, I said, no unapproved exterior lighting is allowed. Yet these have been on your property for months. I also found no record of HOA approval in the last 6 meetings. Mr. Taylor, the same board member who defended me earlier, looked furious. "Linda, is this true?" She stammered. Well, I was planning to submit the paperwork. I just hadn't gotten around to it. I smiled. "Oh, and one more thing. You fined my neighbor 2 doors down for repainting his shutters without approval. But according to the color code list, your shutters are also not on the approved color palette." Gasps filled the room. She turned red. "This is irrelevant." "It's perfectly relevant," Mr. Taylor interrupted. "You can't enforce rules you don't follow yourself." From that moment, the room turned on her. People started sharing their own stories, unfair fines, rude emails, and threats from Linda. One woman said, "She told me my lawn chairs were too bright and made me pay a fine." Another said, "She came into my yard without permission to measure my fence." The board members looked overwhelmed. After a long pause, Mr. Taylor finally said, "We're calling an immediate vote of confidence on Linda's position as HOA president." The room voted unanimously to remove her from the board. Linda stormed out, muttering something about ungrateful neighbors and how she was only trying to help. Yeah, right. After she was removed, the HOA did a full review of all her issued fines. And guess what? Over 70% of them were overturned. Everyone she'd wronged got refunds or apologies. And as for me, not only did I get an apology letter, but the board actually added a new rule, allowing solar garden lights as long as they're not excessive. They even asked me to share photos of my setup as an example of tasteful exterior design. Now, every evening, when I turn on my garden lights, I can't help but smile. Because every glow reminds me of how one person's arrogance can backfire when you stand your ground with facts and patience. Here's the thing, bullies don't always show up in schoolyards. Sometimes, they show up in HOA meetings wearing cardigans and fake smiles. But when you know your rights, keep your cool, and fight back with the truth, they crumble. Linda thought she could control everyone with her clipboard and petty power trips. Instead, she lost everything she tried to control. Now, my neighborhood feels peaceful again. People wave, kids play, and my garden lights shine brighter than ever. Proof that doing the right thing will always outshine the darkness. So tell me, what would you have done if someone like Linda tried to ban your garden lights? Would you fight back or let it go? Drop your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more real-life revenge and justice stories like this one.